On Sunday, the Catholic Church in Australia will celebrate the canonisation of the country's first saint. Mary MacKillop will be honoured in Rome by the Pope, the climax of a campaign that first began in the 1920s. The event will be celebrated around the nation, from her birthplace in Melbourne to her final resting place in Sydney, and where her work began in the tiny South Australian town of Penola. Mike Sexton reports.
There is an air of anticipation in St Peter's Square in the Vatican, where excitement is brewing ahead of this weekend's canonisation of 6 saints.
It's building nicely. In fact, many Australians arriving, adding to the buzz.
They're here because among the half-dozen people being canonised is Mary MacKillop, the first Australian to receive the Church's highest posthumous honour.
When we talk about someone being canonised, what we mean by that is that they're recognised as being a saint for the universal church, so it's not just the local community. It means, in a sense, that they've arrived in the first grade and they're playing the Premiership League.
To understand why such a fuss is being made over an Australian nun, you need to follow her history back to Penola in remote South Australia, where in 1866 Mary MacKillop met a charismatic priest, Father Julian Tennyson Woods.
Together they founded the Order of the Sisters of St Joseph. We say that this is where it all began, in a humble stable.
The humble stable no longer exists, but what does is the schoolhouse where Mary MacKillop began providing free education for local children.
She was captivated by Tennyson Wood's vision about Catholic education, what needed to happen. And she just happened to be in the right place at the right time, so that they then became quickly cooperators in that work, which then led to a quick expansion of Catholic education through South Australia.
By the time of her death in 1909, there were 750 sisters running 12 social welfare institutions and 117 schools across Australia, from big cities to tiny towns.
I grew up in a small town of Hamley Bridge, and in Hamley Bridge we had 2 Josephites in a little school there. We had about 30 students in the school, and I was always very inspired by those Josephites in that town. Some of them are going pretty fast.
Christine Schwert has been a Josephite nun for 43 years and runs a supported accommodation facility for intellectually disabled adults.
The residents that we work with are very simple. They're very trusting, they're very forgiving. They look to us for support and friendship.
You know, what are the things that you want to bring up as part?
Sister Kanice Neal joined the Josephite order after experiencing firsthand the kindness of the sisters while growing up in the remote opal mining town of Coober Pedy. She now works with Aboriginal Family Support Services and often uses the example of Mary MacKillop as a guide.
Sometimes you're working with communities where there's quite a lot of violence, and, you know, it's managing that. And often, you know, each night I would look at, you know, what happened in the day and reflect on how Mary would have responded.
It would be a nice simple story if Mary MacKillop's passion for helping others is why she's been canonised, but part of the reason is the way she dealt with her struggles with church authorities, including protecting the independence of her order and blowing the whistle on a pedophile priest, clashes that at one point had her excommunicated.
I think the thing that's really remarkable about her is that she had every reason in life to be resentful. When you look at her life, it's a chronicle of one sadness after another. But yet she was able to be positive and loving and kind.
The evidence showed that Mary was a great upholder of law and authority and obedience to authority, whereas the bishops were holy bushrangers.
Perhaps no one knows Mary MacKillop better than Father Paul Gardner, who was given the task of preparing the case for Mary MacKillop's canonisation, a job that took the best part of 30 years. Before she could be made a saint, 2 miracles attributed to those who prayed to Mary MacKillop were independently verified. Both were medically inexplicable cures from cancer, but something Father Gardner describes as a sideshow.
When I say sideshow, it's as Pope John Paul said, and he said to me a few times, he said, miracles are an endorsement by God of a human judgment. we make a human judgment, or the Pope's people make a human judgment after a lot of inquiry, that this was certainly a heroically holy woman. That's then endorsed, in his mind, by these divine interventions to say, yes, you're right.
So this weekend, the Pope will declare Mary MacKillop St Mary of the Cross, and nowhere will the celebrations be as keen as in the tiny town on the other side of the world where she started her first school in a shed.
We've been anticipating it for many years. We've been praying for it, and we have to pinch ourselves that it is finally going to happen.
Mike Sexton reporting on St Mary of the Cross from Penola in South Australia.